once again, hockey fans, and welcome to the third and final part of our look at the illustrious career of a one-of-a-kind talent, the man by the name of Stan Mikita. If you haven't checked out parts 1 and 2, please do so before you watch this video. The links are in the description. But to give a little context, Stan has now played 15 NHL seasons, all with the Chicago Blackhawks, and he has done it all. He's won the Stanley Cup, he's won scoring titles, he's the first and only Triple Crown winner and has done it twice by winning the Hart Trophy as MVP, the league scoring title with the Art Ross Trophy, and the Lady Byng for excellence and sportsmanship in the same year, both in 1967 and 68. He's still trying to get Chicago back to the Stanley Cup Finals. He has now played in 5 total. Again, still hasn't won one since 1961. But he is taking on this whole new generation without fear. He has avoided the WHA and the lure of their big money. He has grown with expansion as the league is now even moving forward with more teams. And he is facing a new generation of centermen, such as Daryl Sittler, Bobby Clarke, Marcel Dion, and Gilbert Perreault, toe-to-toe with them in the face-off circle, but he does it without fear, and is going to continue to do so. Also, I should mention his charity work and philanthropy at this point that I failed to mention in the prior videos. Around this time, with a good friend of his, he formed the AHIHA, the American Hearing Impaired Hockey Association, an organization teaching hockey to children with hearing disabilities. The organization is still going today. Stan is now preparing for his 16th NHL season. The Hawks added Serbian-born Ivan Boldarev to their team from the California Seals going in to this season. The Hawks still have a plethora of talent and are coming off yet another big 100-point season, but fell to a much more powerful team, in this case being the Bruins. Despite having a 2-game-to-1 series lead, they would lose the series in 6 games. However, they weren't giving up. As I said, the gang is all here. Cliff Corral, again, who has been Stan's go-to man and vice versa, is there with him. Not to mention Dennis Hull still with this team. Also, you have the likes of John Marks, rising talents like Darcy Rhoda and Dale Talon, veteran Chico Mackey, a strong defense of Keith Magnuson, Bill White. You also had Dick Redmond, and also other veteran forwards like Jim Pappen and Pip Martin still doing their thing with this club, and also in goal, Tony Esposito. Also, you had behind the bench, Billy Ray once again, and their GM of 20 years now, Tommy Ivan. The league continued to grow from now 16 teams to 18 teams as the Kansas City Scouts and the Washington Capitals are added to the league. Expansion had been hit or miss. Some markets were thriving, others were dying. Some were in the middle. Also, league schedule moved to 80 games, and that's where it would stay for the next 18 years. Also, the league was separated into 2 conferences, the Campbell and the Wales Conference, each conference with 2 divisions. The Hawks were in the Campbell Conference and the Smythe Division. As for the WHA Chicago Cougars, they were actually runners-up to the AFCO Cup to the Houston Aeros, giving Gordie Howe his 5th major championship. But now, let's see what our hero has in store for the Hawks, as the game continues to change and grow. He was looking like he wasn't even close to losing a step with a 2-goal, 3-point night against the Bruins, while at Maple Leaf Gardens, he would later have 2 goals, 2 assists for 4 points against the Leafs, going toe-to-toe with Dave Keon in the face-off circle more than once, as he has for 15-some years now. The Hawks were off to a good start. They struggled a little in November, however, but Stan still welcomed Kansas City to the NHL with a 3-point night that included 2 goals. In December, Mikita was trying to keep the Hawks on steady ground, despite their inconsistencies, and looked great with 7 goals, 12 assists for 19 points in 14 games, including 3-point nights against KC and on the road in a tie against the Rising Islanders club. Stan was pushing 35 and was playing like he was 25 in January with 17 points in 13 games, including back-to-back 3-point games against Montreal in a losing cause, and then a win over Pittsburgh. And then later in the month, another 2-goal, 2-assist outing, this one against the Blues. For the 10th time, Stan Mikita played amongst the best, simply because, well, he was one of the best. The NHL All-Star Game in Montreal, where he was there again along with Pappen and veteran defenseman Doug Jarrett actually making his first appearance. The Hawks, however, struggled as a whole, but eventually found their footing while our hero was doing all he could. And he had some more big performances left in him, multiple 3-point nights throughout the season. The Habs on February 16th, the Stars on March 15th, and the Sabres on March 16th. Also, the Hawks finished the season 37, 35, and 8 for 82 points. That's our lowest total since the 1968-69 season where they missed the playoffs, but that's not the case here. They did indeed make the playoffs as a new format was introduced where all the division champions received the first round bye, then 8 more teams would play in a preliminary round, bringing the playoffs to 4 total rounds. And oh boy, look who the Hawks are playing in the preliminary round. The big bad Bruins, who weren't as dominant as the year prior, but still had 94 points. They had a new bench boss, some guy by the name of Don Cherry. But either way, the Bruins again were favored to take in what is a best 2 out of 3 series. Game 1, Boston Garden, and yeah, the series is over before it even starts. The Hawks are embarrassed 8-2. Espo has a hat trick, Vadnais has 4 points, and Orr is a +5. Ugh. Game 2, Chicago Stadium, and wait, the Hawks lead 2-0, and our hero scored on the power play to make it that way. Hey there's hope yet, maybe. The Bruins come out to tie in the second. But wait, Talon scores. The Hawks lead 3-2, and of course, Orr ties in the third, and we're off to overtime. And wait, Boulder Rev scores. The series is tied. Well, I never doubted it for a second. I mean, okay, well, the third and deciding game is back in Boston, but 126 in. Wait. Cliff, Coral, Stan, Mikita to Magnuson. He scores, and with 47 seconds left in the period, it's Stan to Redmond to Coral. It's a 2-0 lead after 1. The Hawks take a 3-0 lead in the second, but the Bruins cut the gap to 3-2, and the Hawks lead 5-3 after 2. And indeed, they complete the upset, a 6-4 win. The Hawks finally get the best of the Bruins. Mikita played very well in the clinching game and came up big when it mattered most, and he and the Hawks are able to shake Boston off their backs. That meant they would have to take on a new foe in the second round. In just their 5th year of existence, the highly talented Buffalo Sabres. They were built by the visionary who was behind the Leafs' success in the 1960s, Punch Imlach. They were coached by Floyd Smith, and the trio making headlines was the French Connection line of René Robert, Rick Martin, and the sensational Gilbert Perreault. Oh, I love those names. They also had reliable scorers such as Don Luce, Rick Dudley, Jim Lawrence, Craig Ramsey, and Danny Gare, not to mention character players such as Spinner Spencer. Their defense was strong with former Hawk Jerry Korab, Lee Fogelin, Jocelyn Gouvernement, Bill Hack, and Jim Schoenfeld. In net, top star Gary Bromley was hurt, but veteran Roger Crozier and former Hawk Jerry J. Jardin were playing very well. So here we go, Game 1, it's in the odd in Buffalo, and it's a one-sided affair as Buffalo's defense is just on point, as are their stars, in a 4-1 win where our hero plays poorly and shows shades of his former hot-headed self with a terrible slashing penalty and a misconduct later on. However, Game 2, 51 seconds in, Stan Mikita makes up for his folly in Game 1 to open the scoring, but then Desjardins stops every shot he faces. The Sabres score 3 goals, all in the first as well. A 3-1 win. This is not good. Game 3 of the series just to Chicago. It's a wild first period. The Hawks are showing more fight, and it's tied 2-2, but then Mikita sets up Redmond. Hawks take a 3-2 lead after 1. Tied 3-3 in the second. That dangerous combo strikes. Mikita's a Coral. He scores, and it's... oh, yes. 4-3 Hawks after 2, but the Sabres tie it. We're now off to overtime. Just 2:31 in. Redmond starts it. Coral continues it. And Mikita ends it! His first overtime goal of his illustrious career, and it keeps the Hawks in the series. What a night for Stan Mikita. 3 points and finally getting to play the overtime hero. Confidence is riding high for Game 4, but the Sabres ran the Hawks back down to reality in a very harsh way, decimating them 6-2. The French Connection doing damage. Our heroes on -3. The Hawks are on the verge of elimination. And indeed, Game 5 back in Buffalo, despite the Hawks lead 1-0 after 1, the Sabres defense is just too much, and they work cohesively to take this one 3-1 and take this series in 5 games. Stan's epic performance and overtime goal in Game 3 is fondly remembered in the annals of Blackhawks history, but this Sabres team is just way too good, and very few could stop them this year. As a matter of fact, the only team that did stop them was the one team that had a better season than them, the Philadelphia Flyers in the Stanley Cup Final. Mikita had 36 goals and 50 assists for 86 points, exceeding the prior season's total of 80 points. And hey, look at that! He and Cliff Coral create more magic as Coral leads all categories. They collaborated one way or another for 44 goals, Mikita assisting on 2/3 of Coral's goals that year. The new man on the line who joined them last season, minor league journeyman Germain Gagnon, and Mikita collaborated for 30 goals, meaning that it counts for all but 7 of Gagnon's points. Once again, still among the best, 86 points, as this is his 9th time in his career he has reached 80 or more points, the 9th time he has reached the 30-goal mark or more. He played in the NHL All-Star Game once again and finished a plus 14. The Hawks' future is looking a little more wonky than usual, and despite being prominent contenders most of Mikita's career, that wasn't really the case anymore. Despite the ever-changing game of hockey, Mikita, now 35 years old, has evolved with it very well. He's watched the schedule go from 70 to 80 games. He has seen the league triple from 6 teams to 18. He has faced off aggressively against the likes of Beliveau, Keon, and Del Vecchio, and showed that very same aggression against Clark, Sittler, or Dion. Scored goals on Terry Sawchuk and Jacques Plante, as well as Bernie Parent and Ken Dryden. But as for the Blackhawks themselves, the team just seem to have trouble now keeping up with the rest of the league. Also, the Hawks suffered some significant losses. Doug Jarrett, after 11 seasons with the Hawks, went to the New York Rangers in exchange for former All-Star goalie Gilles Villemere, while a huge loss was Jim Pappen. He was traded to the California Seals. And now going into his 17th season, however, at long last, Stan Mikita was named team captain. Also, Mikita was on the verge of a milestone prior to the beginning of the 1975-76 season. Only 6 players have reached 500 career goals. As a matter of fact, Mikita's former teammate Bobby Hull was second all-time to Gordie Howe in all-time goals, while Rocket Richard was the first to reach 500 goals. Frank Mahovlich, who is now in the WHA, also achieved the mark, while Espo was the active leader and the latest to hit the mark, while Beliveau rounds out the list. Also, Norm Ullman left for the WHA and was 10 away from 500 when he did. But that means Stan is the 3rd active leader in goals, also behind Johnny Busick, who's closing in on the milestone. Stan needs 33 goals to reach it, and many believed he could and would. However, after playing in just 2 games, he missed 6 due to nagging injuries, but did return on October 25th with a vengeance. 2 goals against KC, and then 3 assists against the Capitals the very next game, but his injuries reared their ugly head, mainly an ailing back. And after that game against the Caps, he would miss the longest stretch of his career, 2 months, 24 games, already missing 30 this year now. The fans in the organization were very concerned. He returned on December 27 with a goal and an assist against the Leafs, and would do the same against the Sabres and Seals, 6 points in 3 games. So Stan, despite his injuries, still didn't seem to be losing much of his step. He would only miss 2 more games all year. In January, he had 11 points in 13 games. The Hawks only lost 2 games all month. But in February, they only won 5, while Stan scored 13 points in 14 games, but was an abysmal minus 11. Our hero shook off the pain and gritted his teeth for the remaining 14 games, and was an absolute beast. 21 points in 14 games, as a matter of fact, and the lowly scouts were his favorite target. 3 assists on the 16th, 2 goals and an assist on March 31st, plus 6 more 2-point games during the month. And on the final game of the season, April 4th against the Blues, the Hawks win the Smythe Division with 82 points, just 1 more than the Canucks, with a 32, 30, and 18 record, and get a bye to the quarterfinals. And in the playoffs, you can already see where this is going. It's 1976, it's Montreal. Bowman coaching? Check. Superstar white winger Guy Lafleur? Check. Shut? Check. The little MPD Mahovlich? Check. Lemaire? Check. Gainey Tremblay Jarvis? Check, check, check. The most devastating defensive trio of all time? Robinson, Lapointe, and Savard? Big check. And to cap it off, Ken Dryden and net? Check. Oh yes, and this team had 127 points in the regular season and an HL record. Well, Game 1 is in the Montreal Forum. Tony O faces a barrage and can only do so much, and Dryden and the Habs defense shuts everyone down. It's a 4-0 win for Montreal. Things look better in Game 2. The Hawks lead 1-0 after 1, but the Habs go to work with their defensive system, and rookie Dougie Jarvis is frustrating our hero all game long as the Habs win 3-1. The series shifts to Chicago, and it's a spectacular goaltending showdown between the former 72 Team Canada teammates Dryden and Tony O. But with 13 seconds to play and the game tied at 1, Lafleur scores the winner. The Habs are ready for a sweep. Game 4, Coral opens the scoring, but it means very little. Dryden is incredible in net. Our hero gets no shots on goal. He only had 7 in the entire series. The Habs win 4-1 and advance en route to a Stanley Cup final win. The Habs just couldn't be stopped, and this team was not going to be the one to put up any fight against them. Our hero was held pointless, as the Hawks as a whole only scored 3 goals in the entire series. In just 48 games, Mikita had 16 goals and 41 assists for 57 points, still averaging more than a point a game, but Cliff Coral was still his top go-to man as they collaborated for 27 goals one way or another. Mikita also clicked very well with Dale Talon and collaborated 10 assists together. Also, the last couple seasons he has clicked well with defenseman Dick Redmond. Despite the 32 games he missed due to injury, Stan Mikita was still very productive when healthy. With 57 points in 48 games, however, he was unable to obtain that 500 goal mark. He was named team captain, however, and did finish out with a -4, the first time he's finished in the minus his entire career. Despite his production still being strong, his injuries were causing alarm, and big changes were ahead in Chicago. Mikita's injury problems were likely a factor as to why he was passed up to play for Team Canada in the inaugural Canada Cup tournament. Also, the Hawks lost Bill White, who retired in the offseason, but got a job on the coaching staff. Hawks, however, made one of the biggest free agent signings in NHL history. Bobby Orr, who shocked the world, leaving the Bruins after 10 seasons, joining the team, and some felt this could be a whole new beginning for the Hawks and a return to glory. Mikita got out to a good start, a goal and 2 assists for 3 points to open the season with a win over the Blues. 2 games later, scored 2 goals against the Canucks. However, Mikita missed 15 games from October to early December, as again many injury issues regarding his back were rearing in. But he returned on December 4th against the Leafs and had 2 assists, and after playing a few games, missed another 7 that month, and returned with 3 assists in a win over Detroit, which was one of only 2 games that the Hawks won that month. This team was a mess, and while Mikita was out of action, head coach Billy Ray, after 14 seasons, was fired as head coach. It's one of only 2 coaches Mikita ever played for, and Bill White had taken over. To top it off, Bobby Orr's knee injuries were getting worse. He only played 12 games so far that season, and also Dennis Hull was no longer producing on a decent level. In January, Mikita had 14 points in 13 games, and the team did improve but had a long way to go. February was not a very good month either, but at least our hero gave the Chicago faithful something to cheer about. On February 27, 1977, the Chicago Blackhawks were hosting the Vancouver Canucks. In the third period, the Hawks were down 4-2, but then Phil Russell took the puck and made a great pass up center to Mikita, who then stymied the Canucks defense, went in on veteran goaltender Cesar Maniago, picked his spot, snapped the puck perfectly into the net. Career goal number 500. Becoming just the 8th player in NHL history to reach the mark, just a few years after he became the 6th to reach 1,000 points. It had been nearly 18 years since goal number 1 on October 7, 1959, on the great Gump Worsley. The fans at Chicago Stadium roared for their hero like they have on many occasions. Mikita, you could see, however, was slowing down considerably, while his heart and desire remained the same. But the Hawks were abysmal, finishing the season 26, 43, and 11, but still inching into the playoffs. Definitely the worst season in Mikita's time with the team. This meant they were going to have to face a rising New York Islanders club in the preliminary round. The Islanders had their best year up to that point in their short history with a huge 106 points, led by their captain, sensational star defenseman Denny Potvin. Up front, another superstar, Brian Trottier. Also the likes of Billy Harris, Clark Gillies, Bobby Nystrom, J.P. Parise, and Ed Westphal. Joining Potvin on defense is his brother Jean, Dave Lewis, Burt Marshall, and Pat Price. In net, the amazing star duo of Billy Smith and Chico Resch, and they were coached by the great hockey mind of Al Arbor. It was clear the Islanders were the team of the future, but would the future be now? Game 1 on the island. The Hawks actually led 2-1 after 2 periods, but the Isles came alive. Hawks defense had no answer, and neither did our hero, or Tony O for that matter. They take Game 1, 5-2. Game 2, we're still on the island, and on the power play midway through the first, Stan Mikita gets to Bob Murray, who finds Dennis Hull. It's a goal. Hawks lead 1-0, but 2:44 later, the Isles tie it. Clark Gillies scored late in the second to give the Isles the lead, and their defense took over. The Hawks have no answer. The Isles complete a 2-game sweep with a 2-1 win. There's no one to blame here. This Hawks team is not going to beat this Islanders team, or likely anyone else for that matter. The Islanders made it all the way to the semifinals when they took the Montreal Canadiens to the limit, but the Habs were the one who would win that series, and then in the next round, beat the Bruins for the Cup. Mikita had 19 goals, 30 assists for 49 points in 57 games, missing a total of 23. It was a mixed bag as the Hawks, again, were a heaping mess, and while Cliff Coral tied another longtime teammate of Mikita's, Pip Martin, with 4 assist collaborations, he had a poor season, although Dick Redmond and Phil Russell, Mikita seen to click with quite a bit. If it weren't for the epic moment where Mikita scored his 500th goal and doing so in Chicago Stadium, this year likely would not have been memorable whatsoever, his second lowest point total of his career, only to his rookie season. He played more games than last season, missing 23, but failed to average a point a game. He is also career worst, -9. But this doesn't all fall on our hero. The Hawks need to make more big changes, as they are now officially in the dreaded rebuilding phase. Mikita was still seen as of value to the team, even if not the same way as before, which is why the Hawks organization chose to hang on to him. However, Tommy Ivan stepped away as general manager after 23 seasons. Taking over as both GM and coach was Bob Pulford, a great hockey player in his day who did some good things with the Los Angeles Kings and would begin a near 30-year association with the club. Bad news, however, as Bobby Orr, who barely played last season, will be out for all of this season. But they pinned their hopes on a new young defenseman by the name of Doug Wilson to complement Phil Russell, as well as Magnuson, who himself was having injury issues, and another rising star, Bob Murray, as Dick Redmond was lost to the St. Louis Blues, and they were also hoping maybe forward Ted Bully can add some substance, as the Hawks also lost Dennis Hull to the Red Wings. Will the Hawks' fortunes ever improve? Statistically, Mikita wasn't going to be the same at this point, but the Hawks were improving, as our hero had 3 assists in 9 games with no goals. In November, the Hawks were terrible. Mikita had 5 points in 11 games. In December, he was looking a bit like his old self with 10 and 14, and he got 10 and 10 in January, which included his biggest game of the year, a goal and 3 assists for a huge 4 points in a win over the Washington Capitals, and the Hawks as a whole were actually looking pretty decent. Mikita had some big outings, 2 goals against the Islanders on February 8th, 2 goals and 2 assists for 4 points against the Penguins on March 19th. The Hawks finished 32, 29, and 19 for 83 points, a big improvement over last season, winning first place in the Smythe, meaning they'll get a bye to the quarterfinal round. This meant they were going to face an old rival in Don Cherry and his mighty Bruins. Gone were the days of Orr, Espo, and Busick, but they were still led by their fearless leader, Wayne Cashman, and joining them was the classy gent, Jean Rattel, the former Rangers star, as well as Terry O'Reilly, Peter McNabb, Rick Middleton, Greg Shepard, and Bobby Schmatz. These are character players that Grapes turned into contenders as a team. You had former Ranger the great Brad Park leading the defense, along with Mike Milbury, Rick Smith, and Gary Doak. And you had an awesome goaltending duo of Gilles Gilbert and returning from the WHA, Jerry Cheevers. The Bruins had 113 points and were hoping to return to a cup final for a second straight year. Game 1, Boston Garden, it's a terrible outing. The Hawks are dominated 6-1. Tony O faces 41 shots. O'Reilly, Cashman, and McNabb are on fire. Game 2, it's looking a lot better. The game is tied at 1. And late in the first, Talon to Mulvey to Stan Mikita. The Hawks take a 2-1 lead after 1. They also lead 3-2 after 2. But the Bruins tied it, and we go to overtime. However, nearly 2 minutes in, Terry O'Reilly ends it, and the Bruins take both games at home, and we're headed to Chicago. It's not looking good as we hit Chicago Stadium for Game 3. 2 goals from Winsink gives the Bruins a 2-0 lead after 1. And our hero scores, however, a big power play goal in the second to get the Hawks in the game, but they respond. The game is tied 3-3 at the end of regulation. In OT, however, the Bruins silence the Chicago faithful, and they're on the verge of a sweep. Game 4, it's not good. The Hawks are down 4-0, and Mikita, however, scores his 3rd goal of the series, 59th playoff goal of his career, but the Bruins complete the sweep with a 5-2 win. Despite the spirited efforts in Games 3 and 4, this Hawks team was outmatched very heavily by the Bruins, and Mikita played fairly well, but overall it wasn't much to write home about. The Bruins would make it all the way to the Cup again, but it would lose to Montreal again. Mikita had 18 goals and 41 assists for 59 points, improving over last year's numbers, but only missed 4 games this year. And once again, Cliff Coral was the guy, collaborating for 19 total goals, but also John Marks was a frequent collaborator with our hero with 17 total goal collaborations. And Mikita's leadership skills are what took center stage this year, as he was determined to erase Chicago's horrendous campaign from the year before, and he stayed healthy and helped lead the way. The Hawks were still building, however, and our hero wanted to be a part of it. Also, he was a plus 17 this season, again a huge improvement. The mighty Mikita was about to enter his 20th season, and while the last few have been plagued with some rough seasons and injuries, including some rebuilding as well, he was determined to see this team through and then try to embark them on a new path to glory. The end of the 1978 meant it had been 17 years since our hero had tasted Stanley Cup glory, and he held out hope that it could happen one more time. He'd only missed 4 games the prior season, and his health looked good going into this season. Speaking of health, however, though, Bobby Orr tried with all his might to gut it out, but his knees were just too damaged and retired after playing just 6 games this coming season. Stan opened the season right with a goal and an assist in a tie with Atlanta, but those would be his only points of the month. The Hawks, however, were somewhat inconsistent, but Mikita was, well, he was pretty great, as he may not have scored a goal in November, but he had 11 assists in 10 games. On December 23rd, the old Stan came out to play again with 2 goals and 2 assists for 4 points in a win over Philly, and then a week later had 3 assists against the Rangers in a losing cause. At this point, Mikita had only missed 3 games and played some more biggies: a 3-point night against the Caps on January 7th, 2 goals against the Islanders on February 4th, 2 goals and assists for 3 points against the Flyers in March. However, Mikita's back issues would end his season on March 24th after garnering assists against the Leafs. He would leave the game and not return for the rest of the year. The Hawks finished with a very mediocre 29, 36, and 15 for 73 points. Pretty big setback. Yet that was still good enough to finish first in that crappy Smythe division. And indeed, he wasn't back when the playoffs began, as fans still held out hope he might return. The Hawks had to face the best team in the league in the regular season, the team that eliminated them 2 years prior, the New York Islanders, who led the league with the best record, 116 points, and also now had sniper Mike Bossy to go along with the other stars. It was a foregone conclusion the Hawks were swept in 4 straight, only scored 3 goals in the series. And of course, like I said, Mikita never played a single game in this series, and rumors of his retirement were swirling. He had 19 goals and 36 assists for 55 points in 65 games. Once again, it's Cliff Coral and John Marks we worked best with. He and Marks collaborated 25 times, while he and Coral worked together 19. Hey, 20 seasons over different generations, but sadly, his season ending the way it did was not how Stan wants to go out. But at this rate, people wondered if he could go. Stan was not a quitter, but questions still remained. Stan Mikita really had nothing to prove after 20 seasons. He could have easily retired right after the 78-79 season, and nobody really would have blamed him. His health seemed to be a very big concern at this point. But this rebuilding phase of the Blackhawks continued, and Stan wanted to play the leadership role, to mentor the younger players of this team to be formidable in the future. A top-tier contender once again. But the game was about to change once again. Since the last expansion in 1974, then in 1976 the Seals became the Cleveland Barons, and the Scouts became the Rockies. By 1978, the Barons merged with the North Stars, and were no more. The league was down to 17 teams. However, something happened at the end of the 1978-79 season. The WHA, despite the way it changed hockey and shook things up, ceased operations. However, the NHL usurped 4 franchises from the dead league. The NHL would expand to 21 teams going into 1979-80 as the Hartford Whalers, Quebec Nordiques, Winnipeg Jets, and Edmonton Oilers would all join the league, meaning Stan's former contemporaries and peers such as rivals Dave Keon and Gordie Howe would return. Also, with teammate Bobby Hull would return, as he's still with the Winnipeg Jets. And an 18-year-old phenom from Brantford, Ontario by the name of Wayne Gretzky, who plays with the Oilers, is now an NHL athlete. Yes, indeed, the game is still changing. Our hero started his career with just 6 teams, but he was used to it and ready to face it head on. And what do you know? The first game of the season sees our hero greet this 18-year-old kid, who does have a year of pro experience under his belt, but Stan Mikita welcomes him to the NHL on October 10, 1979, against the Chicago Blackhawks, and Mikita was schooling the youngster in the faceoff circle. 1:26 into the game, Stan assisted on a John Marks goal, while on a power play, Gretzky, along with Brett Callaghan, assisted on a power play goal from Kevin Lowe. And, of course, for Gretzky, that's to be the first of what would be 2,857 career points. The Hawks, however, won this game 4-2. It was plain to see Stan Mikita was gritting through the pain of his ailing back, and that he was running on empty sometimes. His heart wouldn't let him stop. He kept on driving through. It was hard for some people to watch, and he'd miss the odd game, but every so often, the old Stan would still show up. He scored his first goal of the year with a goal and an assist in a performance against the Washington Capitals on November 21st. But then on November 25th, 1979, the Hawks hosting the St. Louis Blues, Mikita assisted on goals by Bordelot and Logan. With 3:19 at play, O'Connell and Logan set up Stan, who snapped home a nice goal past Ed Staniowski of the Blues. That was goal number 541. Career point 1,467. The Hawks won the game 6-3. Mikita was named the first star of the game, and the Chicago Stadium crowd once again, as they have for over 20 years, showed adoration to their hero. They knew he'd been having it rough this season, so the cheer seemed a little extra special. The Blackhawks began a Western road trip after that win, and Mikita faced a young Gretzky one more time, as the youngster would get 2 assists while Stan didn't see a lot of ice time on the loss. On November 30th, 1979, Stan Mikita dressed for a game against the Vancouver Canucks. It was the 1,394th game he had played, as the 21st anniversary of his first game, which was on November 27, 1958, had just passed. Mikita also took a slashing penalty, bringing his all-time penalty minutes total to 1,270. Towards the end of the game, he wasn't seeing much ice time. And while after the 1-1 tie, the rest of the team flew to Los Angeles for a game against the Kings coming up, Stan Mikita flew back to Chicago. Little did anyone know at the time, he had just played his last NHL game. Unfortunately, Mikita's back problems were just too much to handle. He really went until he couldn't go anymore. His back may have given out, but his heart never did. The Hawks went on to finish 34-27-19 that year, as young stars such as Terry Ruskowski and Doug Wilson really came through for the team, as did the ageless Tony Esposito still in net. A new playoff format was introduced, and the Hawks actually swept the Blues in 3 straight in a best-of-5 series, but would then get swept by a powerful Sabres team in the next round. Shortly after, Stan Mikita would announce his retirement from professional hockey. Mikita's 21st and final season only saw him play 17 games, where he notched 2 goals and 5 assists for 7 points. Both his final goals were assisted by Mike O'Connell and Dave Logan. He assisted on 2 goals for longtime teammate J.P. Bordelot, and each of his assists were collaborated with a different teammate. One last time, he notched one with Cliff Coral, as well as defenseman Bob Murray, even goaltender Tony Esposito. And to top it off, O'Connell, and then Rich Preston for his last. It may not have been the way he wanted to go out, but in his final season, he got to pretty much welcome Wayne Gretzky to NHL hockey. He even got to play against Gordie Howe and Dave Keon one last time. His last game at Chicago Stadium, he was named first star with a 3-point night. Either way, Stan Mikita can now leave the game with no regrets. At the time of his retirement, Stan Mikita's 541 goals was 6th all time. He was actually closing in on 5th, just 3 goals behind the first man to reach 500, the great Maurice "Rocket" Richard. His 926 assists in his career was just 74 shy of 1,000, and he retired 2nd all time, only behind Gordie Howe, who is the only one to reach 1,000 career assists at this point. And finally, his 1,467 career points was 3rd all-time when he retired, just behind Phil Esposito, who would go on to score 20 more points in his final year the following season. And the great Gordie Howe, of course, led all-time with 1,850 at this point. Either way, after all these years, Stan Mikita's 1,467 points, as of this video, is ranked 15th all-time. To this day, he is still the Chicago Blackhawks' all-time leading scorer. On October 19, 1980, Stan Mikita's number 21 was hung from the Raptors at Chicago Stadium, as his number was officially retired by the team. As a matter of fact, his number was the very first retired by the organization, a huge honor for a man who earned it without a shadow of a doubt. The Blackhawks players watched and also showed their respects to a man who they held great respect for, as many of them played alongside him. There was one young man, however, who was injured for this game but still in attendance watching this honor be bestowed. A rookie who was actually Chicago's first-round draft pick that year, 3rd overall. The team's new top center. His name was Denis Savard. Almost 18 years later, he too would have his number retired by the Chicago Blackhawks. Stan's teammates Pierre Pilot, Keith Magnuson, Antonio Esposito, and of course Bobby Hull would all go on to have their numbers retired by the organization. In 1983, in his first year of eligibility, to the surprise of literally nobody, Stan Mikita was inducted as an honored member of the Hockey Hall of Fame. And he was immortalized in a very unique way. In the hit 1992 comedy film Wayne's World, starring Scarborough, Ontario native Mike Myers, a big hockey fan, who wanted to bring a little Canadian flavor to the Illinois suburb of Aurora, had the main character's local hangout be a donut shop in the vein of Tim Hortons. But of course, being near Chicago, Stan Mikita's Donuts was born. Our hero was now ingrained further in popular culture. At the time of Mikita's retirement, the Hawks had the second largest active playoff streak going, only to the Bruins, and they actually wouldn't miss the playoffs again until 1998. They, however, wouldn't win another Stanley Cup until 2010, and won 2 more in 2013 and 2015. Mikita remained active in the Chicago community, especially in his work with the hearing impaired, and he made many appearances in the years following. In 2017, the NHL's 100th anniversary, they released a list of the 100 greatest players of all time, and Stan Mikita made the cut. Sadly, however, around that time, Mikita was diagnosed with Lewy body dementia. On August 7, 2018, Stan Mikita passed away at the age of 78. The tributes that poured out all over the Chicago community and the hockey community all over the world were very touching for a man who left such a great impact on it. Stan never had to be flashy, but he could make the big plays, and his legacy certainly proves that. He didn't always need to be with the big stars like Hull on the same line. He benefited from working with guys like Cliff Horrell, Dennis Hull, Kenny Warham, or Ab McDonald, who may not be Hall of Famers, but they certainly helped Stan become one. It's all here. All these accomplishments, the results of a man who played with every fiber of his being, his heart. He evolved with the game, changed his game, for the benefit of not just himself, but for his team. The only NHL Triple Crown winner, taking home the Art Ross for the scoring title, the Lady Byng for excellence in sportsmanship, and the Hart Trophy as League MVP, and did so twice. He won the scoring title a total of 4 times in his career, played in 5 Stanley Cup Finals, winning 1 in 1961. Sadly, however, this is a stigma that a lot of negative Nancy's and just plain ignorant people have to refer to, his just one ring. They say it doesn't measure up to the greatness of others. And they say he's not as great as others because of it. The fact is, his name is on that cup. His performance in the finals that year got it there. In his entire career, he missed the playoffs once. He had 150 career playoff points in 155 playoff games, and initially set a playoff record with 21 points in 1 postseason in 1962. He retired a very impressive plus 329, not to mention 16 career hat tricks, 10 NHL All-Star games, 6 first-team All-Star selections, 2 second-team All-Star selections, only the 6th player in NHL history to reach 1,000 points, the 8th to reach 500 goals, finishing the top 10 for game-winning goals 9 times, finishing first once, 7 times in the top 10 for power play goals, finishing first once. Played 2 games in the infamous 1972 Summit Series. Hall of Famer. His number retired by the Hawks. Named one of the 100 greatest players in NHL history. And perhaps his most important contribution to the game may be the fact that he's the innovator of the banana blade, the curved hockey stick. And, to top it off, immortalized in one of the greatest comedies of all time, Wayne's World. Well, that does it for our look at the one and only Stan Mikita. I really hope you enjoyed it. What other players would you like to see us cover? Please leave a suggestion in the comments below. But in the meantime, give this video a like, share it, and subscribe to the channel. Until next time, I'll see ya.